viewing or listening to this podcast confirms acceptance of the disclaimer visible on your screen or found at authorscott.com/podcast. Welcome to the Regaining Health and Humanity podcast. I'm Dr. Scott Johnson, your guide on this journey to natural well-being. Here we explore evidence-based insights, revolutionary breakthroughs, and powerful health strategies that not only inform, but inspire change. Together, we'll uncover the mysteries of human existence and unlock the secrets to thriving. This podcast is more than just knowledge. It's your catalyst for unleashing extraordinary potential. Get ready. Your journey to boundless health and happiness starts now. Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Regaining Health and Humanity podcast. I am your host, Dr. Scott Johnson, excited to explore another fascinating topic. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of nootropics. Nootropics, sometimes called smart drugs or cognitive enhancers, are compounds designed to support the brain and body in performing at their best, from sharpening focus and memory to boosting energy, resilience, and even physical recovery. Nootropics are becoming a powerful tool for optimizing human health. But not all nootropics are created equal. And the key to unlocking their full potential lies in precision dosing, tailoring the right compounds at the right levels to each individual. That's why I've invited nootropic and performance expert, Dr. Scott Sherr, to the podcast. Dr. Sherr is a board-certified internal medicine physician and the COO of Troscriptions. He is certified in health optimization medicine and specializes in hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Dr. Sherr's mission is to make complex science easy to understand and apply, something that I feel like we share. Through his clinical work, teaching, and media appearances, he helps people and practitioners use hyperbaric oxygen therapy and health optimization medicine principles to boost brain health, energy, and resilience. Known for clear, actionable education, he translates cutting-edge research into practical steps that improve everyday health. Welcome, Dr. Scott.
Well, that sounds like a lot to live up to in this podcast. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
We were just chatting before saying we hope we don't confuse everybody with two different Dr. Scotts, but I think you'll tell the difference between the voices and who's asking the questions and who's doing most of the talking, right?
Indeed.
I kind of defined what nootropics are, but what exactly are they and how do they differ from traditional stimulants or supplements?
So this is a really great question, and one that's still debated both in the literature and also in common parlance of what a nootropic might be. And when we started our company over 5 years ago, we really kind of looked into this more. And the actual definition of nootropic was developed somewhere in the 1970s, if I'm not mistaken. And at that time, it really was just defined as a compound that enhances brain function. And that's a pretty wide variety of things that can do that. Could it be something like a stimulant, like a prescription, like Adderall? Yeah, that could be it, but also could like an amino acid like L-tyrosine, which increases dopamine and norepinephrine in the brain, also be a nootropic. And so early on, we decided that there needed to be a better classification. And so what we have done as a company, but also in clinical practice, right? Because as a clinician, I get this question all the time. Well, I want something that's going to enhance my brain, right? And I'm like, well, do you want something that's going to be healthy for your brain to enhance it? Or do you want something that's going to be something that's going to help your brain work better, but may not be healthy for the brain? Okay.
Right.
And the key with all of this is like, what's the foundation that everything is sort of laying under, right? And the sense that if you've already optimized brain function, then you're probably also going to do well with various types of stimulants. But if you don't, and for the things that might clock your brain a little bit or like make it stimulated and not have a crash or any issues afterwards. But if you're coming in with a brain that's not optimized to make energy or detox well, for example, you take a stimulant, you might feel good for a little while, but then you may crash and burn.
Right.
So what we did is make some different classifications. And I think this might be helpful as a way to kind of start from looking at a definitional perspective, is that we decided to classify nootropics into basically three categories, but two main categories. The first category would what we would call health optimization nootropics. These are nootropics that enhance the brain, but also are healthy for the brain. Things that don't stimulate the brain to cause more stress on the brain, but actually make it work better. So I already gave you an example of one, actually is an amino acid, L-tyrosine. L-tyrosine is the precursor for making dopamine and norepinephrine in the brain. These are neurotransmitters that do cause stimulation, that do enhance the brain, but because the brain's able to have feedback mechanisms and know when to make more, when to make less, when to have it break down and things like that, you have this health optimization effect where you're improving the function without, causing a direct stimulation. Okay. Another great example is something like CBD. CBD is a, cannabinoid. It's non-psychoactive. It works on the endocannabinoid system, this system in our body that's thought to be this balancing homeostatic system. And it increases a neurotransmitter called anandamide, which is ananda in Sanskrit is word for bliss. That's what it means. And so you get more bliss neurotransmitter, you're going to feel good. It's neuroprotective, it's anti-inflammatory. So that's a health optimization nootropic. It's very supportive for the brain. And then you have things that are what we would call a performance optimization nootropic. And these are nootropics that may help you perform a task, but they may not be healthy for your brain as well. And this might be something like caffeine, for example, or nicotine, or Adderall, or Vyvanse. But there's obviously a big spectrum here as to what that would look like. But these things, what they do is they help stimulate your brain to make more energy, okay? But they may not also support the brain in various ways, because what we also have to remember is that when a brain makes more energy, we're more like a gasoline versus an electric car. Our cell's engine is the mitochondria, and we have some cells in our body that have thousands of mitochondria per cell, like in ovaries, eggs, brain, heart, liver, cardiac tissue, musculoskeletal. And if we increase the amount of energy that you're making, we have also what are called waste products of energy production. And they're really not waste products, but that's what we can think about it in this analogy. So you make carbon dioxide and you make water. You also make reactive oxygen species. These are small reactive things that we make when we make energy that help signal the mitochondria on what to do, make more, make less. We're supposed to have antioxidants that are neutralizing that oxidative stress, those free radicals over time as well. But many of us don't have enough antioxidants around to stay balanced in that way. Okay. And so if you're stimulating the body to make more energy and you crash afterwards, that's often because you didn't have enough capacity to actually be able to handle the energy you just made, right? So performance optimization nootropics can work fantastically well. Caffeine, even low dose nicotine, even other stimulants, like you can have a great effect of those, but you might be sort of like, what is the analogy? It's like you're robbing Peter to pay Paul and John and whatever it is. Like you might be having an initial positive effect, but you might burn yourself in the long term, right? So those are the two main categories. And then the third category is one that we developed, something that we call a bluetropic, not necessarily health optimization nootropic, performance optimization nootropic. And the third one we call a bluetropic, because the sort of exemplar for that class is something called methylene blue, which is both working on health optimizing the system as well as performance optimizing the system at the same time. So there's a couple others that work into this category that can do both at the same time, but it's pretty rare to have something that can do both. And so that's why methylene blue has this kind of own category as what we call a bluetropic. But in essence, what everybody that should be listening thinking is like, well, I don't want just to clock my brain all the time, right? I want to support my brain. And so you can't have true performance optimization really if you don't have health optimization at its core. And so as a clinician, I'm always thinking about that health optimization piece and how to optimize at that level as much as possible before giving things that are going to be performance optimizing.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And it's not surprising that there's not a generally or universally accepted definition for it, because there's not even a universally accepted way of saying it. Because if you're saying nootropics, and it's also nootropics. So I've looked it up because I've said it both ways, and I go, what is the right way? I've heard so many people say it in those two ways. There's different dictionaries that's pronounced both ways. So I guess both are the right pronunciations.
Potato, right? It's all good. I think in the end, the word just really means brain enhancing.
Yeah.
But understanding the difference is super important when you're thinking about what you want to take and how it's going to affect you, right? Unless it's like maybe an extenuating circumstance and you have to take something that you're going to crash from, which again, I don't recommend, but it can be something that you could use short term. In the end, we do care about performance, but we also care about long-term health too. And a balance of that is very important. For me in clinical practice, when I have patients that are coming in, maybe they're perimenopausal, they're having brain fog, difficulty sleeping, having a hard time concentrating, they're like, just give me something that's going to make me more stimulated. I'm like, well, yes, but we also have to balance your nervous system and optimize your gut and do these other things, because if we're just giving you more stimulants, you might feel better for a short period of time, but in the end, you're going to burn, right? And because oftentimes you have to think about what I often call this sort of sympathetic spiral of doom that a lot of people are going through, which is this overactivation of the fight or flight nervous system that is causing challenges in the mitochondria in various ways that are causing deficiency in energies in production. And so if you don't address some of these other things foundationally, like this spiral that's happening in so many people, where they're wired and tired, they're anxious, they're depressed, their minds can't shut off, and they want more stimulants. I'm like, well, I don't think that's the right way to go right now. Let's really focus on that foundational piece and how we can address that. So my perspective is always from a clinical perspective, Scott, because like I see enough patients to know, and I've seen in the past to know that if I just give somebody that's overstressed more stimulants to make them focus better, it's not going to go well in the long term.
It's really a short-term solution for something that we need a more long-term solution. So I agree with you there. One of the things that you talk about is precision dosing. So can you explain what precision dosed means in the context of nootropics, and why is this approach more effective than a one-size-fits-all model?
The first thing I would say here is that there are so many supplements out there that have what are called proprietary blends. And a proprietary blend can be anywhere from 2 to 200 of something. And all they'll give you is a milligram dosage of that entire conglomeration of things. Okay. If you see proprietary blends out there, for the most part, put it back on the shelf and don't buy it. Okay. Because the problem with proprietary blends is that you really don't know what you're getting. And this is the exact opposite of precision dosing. And because in a proprietary blend, you might have, let's say, 5 different ingredients in a proprietary blend, and it says 500 milligrams, right? But you might have like 495 milligrams of one of them, and then you have 5 milligrams of the rest. And
right.
So you just don't know what you're getting. So when I think about precision, it's that you're getting the same dose of what you're looking for every single time. And so that's the best way to really understand how something's affecting you, right? And so there's a lot of different examples of this. One of the examples I like to give is that this one compound that I use a lot is called methylene blue, and I mentioned it earlier. And this can come in liquid form, it can come in capsule form, it can come in a troche form, as we do at our company. But the issue is that if you're taking a liquid in a dropper, any liquid in a dropper, it'll say 1 ml is 10 milligrams or something like that, right? Supposedly. But almost all of the liquids that we've tested, at least with methylene blue, never meet their label claim, meaning you don't really know how much you're actually getting. So it might say you're getting 10 milligrams in a dropper, but when we test it, it's like you're getting 5 or 7 milligrams or something like that. And the difference, if you're not taking something precision, you don't exactly know how much you're taking. You don't really know how to modulate that, right? At taking 10 drops or of anything, because I'm like, what does that even mean? Like how much? And so when it comes to precision, it's the best way to know exactly how much you're getting and then how much you need to change over time. And if you're not getting what you're thinking you're getting, like you could also be getting things in there you don't want to get as well. It could be contaminated, for example, with other things that are not good for you. In the case of methylene blue, for example, it's heavy metals, lead, mercury, cadmium, and arsenic, which you have to be super careful of. You don't want that in your supplements, for example. So when we were creating our own line of things, one of the main things that we looked at was how can we keep something as precision dosed as possible? In a pharmaceutical world, if there's a milligram dosage on the label, it says 5 milligrams, for example. Your actual dose of that pharmaceutical has to be plus or minus 10% of what it says on the label. And that's what we do at our company, but very few supplement companies are doing that kind of testing. And so you bought one batch of your supplement and you felt pretty good. And then the next batch, you're like, this feels terrible. And the next batch, it feels like, oh, somewhere in between. And so this is actually even common in the pharmaceutical world, right? Where some people are super sensitive, where they take a generic from one company and a generic from another, and it has a completely different feeling. And then that can also do this. And so you have to be super careful with that. But what it comes down to is that, again, short story is that precision is super important. So you know exactly what you're getting every single time.
Precision dosing sounds like it's Just ensuring a clinically relevant dose is really what you could boil it down to, is you want to make sure that you're getting the right amount to actually have a clinical efficacy within the individual. I think personalization is also really important. Personalized medicine, it really is what we should all be focusing on, because each person is an individual. We need to make sure that we're meeting their individual needs based on their biology and genetics and health history and everything else that comes with that. So how do individual factors such as genetics, metabolism, or even lifestyle impact how someone responds to nootropics?
Across the board, it's going to be different for everybody. And that's why it's so important to know what you're getting every single time. You can trust that the next batch of your supplement is going to be the same as the last batch of it, so that you don't have to worry that there might be like a huge variation. You have to take all that into effect and all that into account when you're thinking about how to really personalize dosing for somebody. And I mean, a rule of thumb for everybody that's listening, look, go low and slow. Okay. I almost never recommend taking what they recommend on the dosage when you first start. And everybody that's listening probably knows at least kind of what their sensitivity is as well. Right. So like, are you one of those people that are sensitive to most things? Or are you kind of like the iron person that needs huge doses to get the effect? And so you kind of know that going in. For me, I know that I'm usually pretty sensitive. And like, if I'm getting capsules of something to try, I'm often going to be doing a half of a capsule to start off with, as opposed to taking the full capsule. Even if the dose is like 2 capsules a serving, I'm like, no, I'm taking a half a capsule to start off with. And so in precision land, the troche is a pretty cool delivery, because a troche is a dissolvable lozenge that goes between your upper cheek and gum, and it's scored. So you can take a quarter, a half, or a full. So you can like really get to the minutia of your dosing. And that's one of the reasons why we chose it, is because it was very easy to titrate that way. So you could start off with the quarter, see how you feel, and then go to a half and a full, depending on what's required. And that's really been game-changing in my clinical practice, because I know that many people are as sensitive as I am, and that they really need to have that kind of tailored dose. And you talked about genetics, you talk about metabolism. These are all really important too. And you can test for all these things. And I do test metabolism. I test for the gut and inflammation and things like that in my clinical practice. And it gives me a sense of what is going to be necessary as far as looking at dosing and what might be helpful. And also, and as I mentioned earlier, really a good idea of where I can start from a health optimization perspective. And that's going to be the most impactful long term. So a good example of this would be, see a lot of people, and oftentimes many of them have a gut that's being a little bit of a spoiled stepchild, right? It's not doing what it's supposed to do. A leaky gut is really what I'm describing here. And so if you have a leaky gut, you're having this sort of inflammatory reaction, and your body and brain are inflamed. Your brain is probably also leaky as well, meaning the blood-brain barrier is leaky. And that means things are getting in there that aren't supposed to. And so what I've done over the years is, well, should I give this person something to stimulate their brain? And the answer is like, well, maybe there's certain things that can stimulate the brain that won't be as detrimental from like a energy production causing too much of a toxicity or detoxification reaction. So I do think about that. Maybe very low doses of nicotine actually are very interesting here, even though nicotine's a stimulant that has, this effect by increasing energy. There's also some significant anti-inflammatory effects of nicotine as well, especially on the vagus nerve, interestingly enough. And so in the brain, where like low doses, a milligram, maybe 2 milligrams, but certainly a milligram or a half a milligram can be very, very helpful here. I might think about that. But I also be thinking, well, I need to heal the gut, right? If I can heal the gut with this individual, like their brain's going to work so much better, even if I don't give them stimulants. And so a couple of cases I can think of just off the top of my head, like really significant leaky gut, used the primary fuel of the small intestine, which is glutamine. Glutamine is your primary fuel, which is an amino acid. It's important for muscle health. It's important for a lot of things, but it's the primary fuel of your small intestine. So giving glutamine, healing up the gut, and then inflammation goes down, all of a sudden their brain's feeling so much better, right? So it wasn't like a nootropic, but it kind of is. If you heal somebody's gut, their inflammation goes down, their brain functions better. And I have tons of stories like this in patients where you heal something, you optimize something on that cellular level, and then all of a sudden everything's easier. They feel better. And then maybe you can use a little bit of extra caffeine or maybe some additional stimulants to help with the brain. And they don't get the detrimental effects because they're more healed up, they're less inflamed and more optimal.
I want to get into some of the benefits of nootropics now. First, starting with mental and emotional benefits. What kinds of improvements in focus, memory, cognition, just cognitive resilience in general can people expect from a properly dosed nootropic regimen?
So every nootropic's have a different spectrum of what it's going to be able to do in the brain. I like to talk about nicotine because people get scared about it. And it's one of the best nootropics on the planet. If you don't vape it, you don't smoke it, and you keep the dose very, very low, because it has this capacity, specifically nicotine, we can increase your memory, your recall, your focus, your verbal fluidity, and decrease brain inflammation at the same time. It's actually been studied at low doses in Alzheimer's and mild cognitive impairment with significant benefit. And there's a lot of interesting work that's been going on over the last several years in long COVID as well. And so you don't want to vape it or smoke it, okay? Because nicotine itself is addicting, but if you keep the dose less than about 4 milligrams per day, and again, you don't vape it, you don't smoke it, the risk of addiction is very, very small. The vaping and smoking also contains additives in those products that make it more addictive.
Right.
So not to say that nicotine itself isn't addictive, but with adding those additives and having the instant hit of the nicotine in the system, that has a much more addictive capacity and potential overall. I use a little bit of nicotine personally, and I also use it in my patients. And then I have them use it in the context of health optimization, the things that I was mentioning before. But that's a good example of what a nootropic can do. Now, the most common nootropic in the world that everybody uses, you probably know the answer to this, Scott.
Caffeine?
Caffeine, exactly. Coffee, caffeine, and all the things, right? So caffeine is the most widely used nootropic in the world. And the way caffeine works is it actually blocks a receptor in your brain called the adenosine receptor. And when adenosine is blocked, adenosine is a neurotransmitter. It's also involved in energy production, making adenosine triphosphate and multiple feedback pathways there. So when you block the adenosine receptor, you get more wakeful, right? But what happens when caffeine stops being around, then you get this flood of adenosine afterwards, and that's where you can get this crash in people. So the more caffeine you drink, the more crash you can get. And then the more caffeine you drink, the more tolerance you create, because what happens is the receptors in your brain, they respond to this huge amount of blockade and make less of them over time. And so this is why people drink caffeine all the time, get caffeine headaches if they don't drink caffeine. And I was very much a culprit of this for many, many years until I was able to come off caffeine and only use it more periodically for intentional reasons. But I don't have a problem with caffeine. Don't get me wrong. I think many people do well with caffeine, and that's totally fine. But by stimulating the system, it actually stimulates norepinephrine and epinephrine, specifically neurotransmitters that stimulate the system. That will give you more wakefulness, more focus. It doesn't give you more drive. It doesn't really give you increased memory, increased recall, increased verbal fluidity like nicotine does. So a little bit different spectrum of what it does. You also have many other nootropics that are on the market, right? You have everything from the racetams that are out there to your prescription drugs like your Adderalls and your Vyvanses and many things across the board. But in general, what a nootropic is supposed to do is give you more focus, more productivity, more wakefulness, and more capacity to sustain doing something. That could be physical, that could be cognitive. And so in the context of what we're talking about here, I just always like to remind people that it's not always about stimulating the brain to get more focus too. So some people need to calm down their brain to perform better. Because if your brain is in this hyperstimulated mode, you actually have less blood flow going to the front of your brain. And that's where you have your executive function. That's where you have your capacity to keep things in your mind, to bring things from your short-term and your long-term memory, to keep your focus and your sort of visual spatial recognition. So if the classic example of this is that you have this dream where you're about to give a speech, you're in front of everybody and you forget your lines. This is when your brain is so hyperstimulated that the blood flow in the brain goes down and then you forget what you were going to say. So in some people, nootropics can actually be things that calm down the brain as well. And this is not what you would think about as a nootropic, but this is something that I see in clinical practice all the time, where I enhance actually what's called the GABA system in the brain. GABA is our primary inhibitory neurotransmitter, so it calms down the firing of the brain. And they're like, holy moly, now I can actually perform better. Like my brain's dropping into flow. I'm able to perform better at work. I'm a better parent. I'm better with my spouse. My mind is quieter, but I'm performing better. So it's a bit of a dance. You have to kind of see what's going to be better for you. But I'm not joking here to say that about 3/4 of the people that I see that want to be stimulated more can actually do better with being stimulated less. And that's not an overstatement. And I think that even in people that going through like midlife changes, like even better in perimenopausal time frame, and I have a lot of patients like this, they need a little bit of stimulation, sure, but what will also be more beneficial long term is understanding stress levels and that sympathetic overload, right? And so if we can work on that sympathetic overactivation, calm that down, their brain's so much happier, their physical avatars are so much happier, and then we can add on stimulation, but they have more reserve for that. Dropping their baseline is just so powerful. And I know this can be so hard to do because all of us want to say that we need to do more to feel better. But what if we could do less? That is often the big fork in the road for people. Once they realize that they can calm down their nervous system and perform better, it's game changing.
I'm glad you explained that because I think most people, when they hear the word nootropic, just automatically go to a stimulant. They're thinking something is going to stimulate my nervous system, but it really is about balance because we do have calming neurotransmitters or relaxing neurotransmitters and inhibitory transmitters, and then we have stimulating neurotransmitters, and we need to make sure that there's a balance. We don't want to overdo either one, or the nervous system is not in its optimum state to keep us in our own healthy state. It's also interesting, you're talking about nicotine and the way that the reputation of nicotine has changed over the last several years. Yeah, and even the benefits and the uses of it. And I really attribute a lot of that to the long COVID and the ability of nicotine to help people with some of those long COVID symptoms. That has kind of shifted people's thinking, especially clinicians, on nicotine and maybe some off-label uses for it.
I have some amazing stories about it, Scott. I had one lady that took a milligram, not even a half a milligram of nicotine in a buccal troche with a couple other things, a little bit of methylene blue, a little bit of caffeine. She had lost her smell for 2 years. And then very interestingly, she had this sort of detox reaction right in front of me when she took it. Because the thing about nicotine is that it's very fast acting. So it's not like if you take it as a troche, if you swallow it, it's pretty fast acting within about 15 to 30 minutes. Typically, if up in the mouth, it's going to be even faster within about 5 to 10 minutes. So I saw her go through this sort of this detox reaction. She broke out into a mild sweat. She felt uncomfortable. And I gave her some water. I encouraged, I supported her. And then the next day, her smell came back.
Wow.
And it was like, I haven't smelled in 2 years and now I can smell. And I have a lot of my colleagues that are using nicotine patches in their patients with long COVID and seeing really great effects. So nicotine, the way it works is it binds to a receptor in the brain called the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor. Yep. And when it does that, it releases and increases the release of dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and acetylcholine. So all those neurotransmitters. Dopamine is the one that causes the potential addiction, but it's the other ones that are also really important. Acetylcholine is really important for memory, for example. But in addition to that, it has this anti-inflammatory effect on the brain and also the body, both by decreasing the reactivity of these cells in the brain called the microglia. The microglia are these cells in our brain. They're basically our immune system in our brain. And if they get overactive, they are not happy and the brain's not happy and everybody else isn't happy. And so the microglia, what happens with the nicotine stimulates them in a way that decreases their inflammation, decreases their activity. And at the same time, it has this effect on increasing acetylcholine that I mentioned. And the vagus nerve in our body is activated by acetylcholine. And so the vagus nerve is our primary nerve that comes from our brain that calms down our entire system. So it's our relaxation nerve and it's stimulated by acetylcholine. And so I was skeptical of nicotine first as well, because I grew up during the DARE generation. I was put on a bus in the 90s and told not to do drugs and not to smoke and all these things about nicotine and everything else. And I was definitely a skeptic of nicotine initially, but now I'm a complete believer in it. I think that the key is to keep it very low dose, right? Most of the products out there are much higher 5, 10, 20 milligrams of nicotine. Yeah, that's going to make you feel good, probably. Although those high doses can also cause diarrhea in people. They cause diarrhea on a lot of people. My feeling is keeping it low dose can go a long way. And we have a product that has like low dose nicotine, 1 milligram, caffeine, CBD, and methylene blue. That's fantastic for stimulating the system with productivity, focus, flow, all those things, but without giving you too much at the same time. And there's a methylene blue in there. There's a little bit of CBD that really rounds it out, so you don't get that edginess that you might get. Some people do get an edginess even with taking oral nicotine at low doses. I do, actually. On my desk right here, I have some patches, and I've never tried a patch before personally, so I'm going to try one, but I'm going to cut it up and try a small little piece first. I like to say it's like Back to the Future with nicotine. Doctors used to recommend smoking. They had their favorite brands back in the 90s and 60s. That didn't go well, as we all know. Right. But now we're in a place where I think we understand where nicotine might be able to be facilitating health and potentially optimizing it in several ways.
Beyond brain health, how do nootropics influence physical performance, energy, and even recovery?
So in the same ways that nootropics typically increase neurotransmitters, they will also increase the capacity of your body to do better under certain types of physical stress. And that's because mostly what we're talking about from a nootropic perspective is that you will perform better from a cognitive perspective when you're doing physical performance. That's how nootropics work in physical performance, mostly. There's this anti-inflammatory effect. There's a couple other things depending on the exact nootropic that you're talking about. But in essence, if you can focus better at a task and you're doing a physical activity, you're going to likely do better at that, for that physical task. Like, for example, nicotine is a fantastic nootropic and it's used as a pre-workout. Why? Caffeine, same thing. You're not thinking about where you're going to be eating for dinner 2 days from now. You're not thinking about what your kids are doing for their birthday party. You're focused on your workout. If you're focused on your workout, you are going to perform better and you're going to have a chance of injuring yourself. So it's the thing about nootropics that I think are probably most important from a workout, pre-workout is just getting you in that zone, getting you in that place where you're able to truly perform better because you're more focused on what you're going to be doing. There are some potential additional benefits when it comes to mitochondrial support, especially with something like methylene blue, because methylene blue is a fantastic mitochondrial optimizer. And as a result of methylene blue optimizing on the cellular level, you see energy production capacity increase and you see detoxification capacity increase too. You also see the capacity on a performance side with methylene blue to actually work just like oxygen in the cells. And you can see endurance go up. You can see your ability to maintain your heart rate stay up for longer because you reach your lactate threshold later. And so those are benefits outside of being a pure nootropic because you are seeing the energy enhancing capacity of this. And also from a performance perspective, going back to the GABA system for a minute, if you downregulate your nervous system as fast as possible after exercise, the faster you do it, the more gains you will see with the endurance or strength work that you're doing. So it's not technically a nootropic, as we were kind of alluding to earlier, but if you can bring yourself down into that parasympathetic rest digest nervous system as fast as possible, you are going to see better performance gains at the gym the next time because you're going to be more recovered for the next workout. So the problem you see in a lot of the performance world is that people are overtraining and under recovering. If you can work on that under recovering side of things, you can see massive improvements in performance. And I've actually done a couple of lectures where we call this the parasympathetic edge for performance, which is downregulating your nervous system is going to give you a bigger edge at the gym, not only after you work out, but actually even before you exercise. So if you go into like a hard charging day where you're sympathetically activated and you go directly to the gym, your reserve, your capacity to increase your nervous system even further is severely limited because you're already at a high level. But if you come in at a low level, you're sort of chilled out, then you have more reserves. So you can actually be able to do more work for longer at the gym as a result of that. So those are some ideas of how I think about this.
For someone who's maybe curious about nootropics, but they're brand new to it, what would a safe, practical entry point into trying them look like?
Good question. I'm pretty far into this world at this point in my life here, Scott. So I would say that, as I was mentioning earlier in the podcast, starting with things that are healthy for the brain is the most important thing that you can do, I think, because if you're optimizing from a health perspective, you're supporting your brain over the long term, right? So you're not going to have a come down as much. You're not going to have a crash as much potentially if you take something that might be more unhealthy for the brain, even if it's good for a specific task. Okay. Number two would be to try to find something that is precision dosed, as we mentioned earlier, right? Because you want to have something that is clinically relevant, that you know is going to be the same thing every single time. So I think precision is really important. I think understanding what your goals are from a performance perspective is also very, very important. Because if you understand your goals, then you can really be sort of precise about how you titrate to performance over time. So I guess the other piece of it is don't take the max dose right away. Always start off with a lower dose and increase your dose over time to see what's working best for you. And then from there, you get the real good sense of what you're going to be using in a precision targeted way over the long term. And I always say that doing a foundational health assessment is really a good idea in the sense that if you go to your conventional doctor, they're only really looking at a very small number of biomarkers that might be helpful to look and assess for you having an early disease, but they're really not going to give you a good sense of your overall health. And so what I do in clinical practice is I work on foundational health markers. I use a science called metabolomics, which is a science that looks at real-time measurements of what's happening in your cells right now and what just happened. Look at your gut health, neurotransmitters, hormones all together and really get a sense of where are you starting and where do we need to really get you over time, or where do you need to go? And how can we get there with diet, with lifestyle, with stress management, supplementation, et cetera. And so when somebody comes in to see me and they say, hey doc, I want to feel better because my brain doesn't work. I want stimulants, or what's the best nootropic? I like, well, let's take a look at what's under the hood first, and let's see what we can do to optimize you from a foundational perspective. And then maybe you won't need those nootropics. Maybe you won't need them as high of a dose. Maybe you won't get as much of a crash when you take them. And I've seen this in my own personal life. If I'm high stress and doing things and I try to take something, I'm like, oh, that was a bad idea. And then I'm like, oh, instead I should be getting more sleep or optimizing my hydration or trying to figure out if I need to get a separate bedroom for my partner because she's snoring or he's snoring. And that's messing up my sleep or messing up my stress levels, right? And so no matter how much of a nootropic I give you, if you're not sleeping well, it's not going to go well.
Right.
And so the basics are so important. I think people just want that one thing that's going to make them feel better. And there isn't just that one thing that's going to work for most people. You might get significant benefit from some of the foundational things: hydration, sleep, stress management, dietary optimization. And that can be different for everybody. I'm not telling people what to eat per se, although maybe I have some guidance there. But in general, it's foundational things are so important. And so if you're just thinking about the nootropic as being the answer, I promise you it's not going to be long-term.
I appreciate you mentioning the lifestyle and those foundational things, because what I try and teach people also is similar, that these foundations being established first are going to make anything that we do as a supplement or beyond that, that's more targeted and strategic, work far better. We're going to get better results and quicker results if we have that foundation established. Our cells have to be nourished. We have to have the right hydration. If you're not sleeping, there's repair processes and restoration processes that are just not happening. And so you have to have all of these things in place if you really want to start using some of these targeted solutions and see results.
Yeah, but I get it too. And I'm going to just kind of acknowledge, Scott, that it's difficult along the way sometimes, right? People are really want to get there, but it takes time, right? And there are certain things you can do that might be lower risk and more supportive. And, one of the ones I use actually a lot now is methylene blue, because it has the capacity to help you make more energy, but it doesn't clock your system because it also helps you with detoxification at the same time. So I can compare it to a gasoline powered car to an electric car, where you don't really have any waste when you run it. And so that's super low doses, like 4, 6, 8 milligrams, like just a little bit of methylene blue can go a long way. I know it's not from the ground, it's a synthetic, and people do get worried about that. But I also like to remind all of you that you're living under synthetic things and eating synthetic things. And sometimes we need synthetic things to help neutralize and optimize in that capacity. Just like taking natural things is not always a good idea. If you're foraging for the wrong mushrooms, you might die from them. And I've seen that before. So I think that a zero-sum game is not the way we should live life, and knowing there's always more nuance here. So, but I get it. Not everybody's going to want to do that. But I found that in my clinical practice, it's been really transformative. So even like a teeny little bit of nicotine, actually, like 0.25, 0.5 milligrams, like just a super low amount with some supportive things associated with it. Like especially what I found actually in the perimenopausal timeframe, because brain fog is such a big deal, that like nicotine can go a huge way, just giving just a little bit more without as long as you don't go too high of a dose without giving too much stimulation and really too much issue with any crash or detox afterwards. So I probably talked about some controversial nootropics here, right? Caffeine's not that controversial, but I have a problem with caffeine personally. And I see this oftentimes when you're sort of like a midlife change, people don't have as much of the same response to caffeine anymore, right? Because caffeine, not only is it increasing some of those neurotransmitters, it's also increasing your cortisol levels too. So your stress hormone. And if your cortisol levels are up, your blood sugar is going to go up. And if your cortisol levels up, it's going to stimulate your mitochondria to try to make more energy. And then it causes a whole bunch of other things too. So increasing caffeine is typically not the answer, but something like just stopping all refined sugar could be your answer. Even if we did nothing else, because I just found out that refined sugar has this effect on me, why would I go back to refined sugar, you know? And so it can be small little levers that you don't realize you're making. And as a clinician, I'm always shocked at sometimes what these things are. Like one of my patients a couple of days ago stopped having her stevia drinks. She was having, I thought she was having one. No, she's having 10. I didn't know. And she's like, oh, I just stopped them. I'm like, well, how many were you using? She's like, I was talking about 10 a day. I'm like, that's a lot of stevia drinks, right? These small little changes can go a long way. So it's not always about the nootropic. It could be about something very simple in your life that you don't realize you're doing. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, new brain,
Well, briefly, I wanted to ask you, where do you see the field of precision nootropics going in the next 5 to 10 years, and how might that change human performance optimization?
What we're really doing, Scott, is dialing in the capacity for us to look at genetics, epigenetics, exposomics, which is the study of toxins in our environment, our metabolomics, which is the study of these small molecules that I mentioned you can measure in the cells. What I think you're going to see is that this more precision, narcissistically based bucket of you, right? Where you have all these various levels of who you are, in quotes. Like a really fun fact, ladies and gentlemen, you're vastly outnumbered human cells to bacteria, fungus, and virus that are living inside and around you right now. So who's really running the show? It's always a question here. And so we're going to have a better sense of all of that, I think, and then be able to go, okay, because of what's happening with this sort of, we call it the holoorganism, the holobiont is actually the fancy name, HOLOBIONT, holobiont. What's happening with this holoorganism that is you, then we can say, okay, how about nicotine today? Is that a good idea? Plug it into your system, beep, bop, boop, bop, beep, bop, the old sort of computer thing. And then, yep, that's perfect for you today. Like, let's rock it. And it's also going to take in wearable information like your HRV and your sleep scores, et cetera. And like, okay, so HRV is this. Your metabolic profile over the last 6 months is this. Your genetics say this and your genetics don't change, right? But then you have all these other things in your environment and the volatile gases in your air. I think what you're going to see is that you're going to have this sort of huge data sets of things like bringing all that stuff together and going, okay, this is what would be optimal for you because of all that, right? And that's my hope, I guess. And I do have a company that's working a little bit on that, which is like, how do you bidirectionally flow wearable data into biometrics, not your biometric data from wearables to what's happening with various, with your experience using various technologies, which is interesting. And then how that all plays into labs and things like that. So I'm excited for all of that. I think that we have enough computer power now to be able to kind of see this and happening at all these sort of levels that I just mentioned.
That's very interesting, and it aligns with a lot of the things that I think just medicine in general is going to be going more towards the genetics profiles, the epigenetics, just really understanding how everything is going to work better within our body, whether it's natural or a synthetic, so that we can better fine tune and be more precise in what we do for each individual's health based on what they exactly need. So it's an exciting thing to think about. There's a lot of work ahead. There's a lot to do to get there, but it's exciting to think about. And I appreciate you being on, Dr. Scott. It's been an interesting conversation, and the stuff that you've shared, I think will help to people so that they can better understand what options are available to them and maybe how they can toe dip into the nootropics world.
Always recommended. Yes, go slowly, and find your way and your path.
All right. Thanks again, Scott.
My pleasure. If anybody's interested, they can learn more about me. If you're interested, I do have a website. It's drscottsherr.com. Just my name, DRSCOTTSHERR.com. And there I have my consulting. So we didn't talk a lot about hyperbaric medicine, but if you're interested in that, I have consulting for that. I also have a foundational health practice, telemedicine based here just outside of Boulder, Colorado, where I live. And I do foundational biomarker testing in a framework called Health Optimization Medicine. That's also a nonprofit that I help run that educates doctors. So if you're a practitioner, you're interested in learning how to optimize health with your patients or clients, you don't have to be an MD. You can learn how to do this in a 7-module certification that we optimize health rather than treat disease. And that's at homehope.org. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. I hope you've gained insights to elevate your health and life. For more transformative evidence-based wisdom, I invite you to explore my 20-plus books at authorscott.com/shop. Don't miss out on the chance to supercharge your health and guide others to a better life. Like, share, and subscribe to join the movement transforming lives. Here's to your journey toward boundless health and happiness.